Good evening, and welcome to the Sleepy Badger. My name is Oliver, and tonight I'll be your guide as we wander into a world of gentle stories, cozy places, and peaceful dreams. So before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Settle beneath your blankets. Rest your head upon your pillow and allow the worries of the day to drift away. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do, and nothing expected of you. For the next little while, simply listen. Together, we'll visit quiet villages beneath the stars, moonlit forests filled with wonder, winding streams that whisper through the night, and warm cottages where lanterns glow softly in the darkness. As our story unfolds, feel free to close your eyes whenever you wish. And if sleep finds you before we reach the end, that's perfectly all right. That's exactly what these stories are for. So take a slow, gentle breath, relax, and let's begin tonight's journey. Welcome to the Sleepy Badger. The stars still filled the sky above Willow Creek. Night had not quite ended. Morning had not quite begun. It was that gentle hour between the two when the whole world seemed to pause for one final peaceful breath before the day quietly opened its eyes. The village slept beneath its little patchwork of rooftops. Curtains were drawn. Lanterns had burned low, flower boxes rested beneath silver drops of dew, and the winding creek that gave Willow Creek its name moved softly through the darkness, reflecting the stars above like tiny diamonds scattered across the water. Even the wind seemed careful. It passed through the trees with a whisper, barely stirring the leaves, as though it too knew the village was still asleep. Only one building was awake. At the far end of Baker's Lane, where the cobbles curved gently towards the village square, a warm golden glow shone through the windows of Mrs. Bramble's bakery. It had done so every morning for as long as anyone in Willow Creek could remember. Some traditions were simply too lovely to change. Inside Creek Cottage, Oliver slowly opened his eyes. Not because of an alarm, not because anyone had called him. He simply loved this quiet hour before sunrise. For a few peaceful moments, he remained tucked beneath his thick patchwork quilt, listening. The cottage was wonderfully still. The fire in the hearth had settled into glowing embers. Somewhere outside, beyond the window, an owl gave one final gentle call before returning home to Owl Hill. Oliver smiled to himself.
What a lovely morning,
He said, to no one in particular. Beside the fireplace, Maple was curled into an impossibly small ball, her ginger fur glowing softly in the last warmth of the fire. Only the tip of her tail twitched now and then as she dreamed. Oliver climbed quietly from bed. The old floorboards gave their familiar little creaks beneath his furry feet. He rather liked those sounds. They reminded him that his cottage had been standing for many years, quietly welcoming every winter frost, every spring blossom, every summer breeze, and every golden autumn leaf. He slipped into his favorite green dressing gown, the one stitched with tiny golden stars around the cuffs. The little stars caught the faint firelight as he tied the belt around his waist. Then he padded softly into the kitchen. The kitchen at Creek Cottage was small, but it was exactly the right size for Oliver. Copper pans hung neatly from wooden hooks. A row of clean mugs rested upon an open shelf. A bunch of dried lavender hung beside the window, and on the windowsill sat 3 smooth stones Oliver had collected from the creek on especially pleasant mornings. He filled the old copper kettle from the stone water jug beside the sink. The kettle had belonged to his grandfather. It whistled in a funny little tune that no other kettle in Willow Creek seemed able to copy. Oliver had always thought that made the tea taste just a little better. While the kettle warmed upon the stove, he opened the kitchen window. Cool morning air drifted gently inside, fresh, crisp, carrying with it the scent of damp earth, lavender, and sleeping gardens. Oliver breathed deeply. The village always smelled different before sunrise. Everything felt cleaner somehow, quieter, as though the world had been washed during the night and left outside to dry beneath the stars. Then another scent slipped through the window. Warm bread, fresh butter, sweet cinnamon, honey. Oliver closed his eyes for a moment and smiled. Mrs. Bramble had already begun. Every morning, while the rest of Willow Creek slept, the elderly hedgehog baker worked quietly behind the glowing windows of her bakery. Bread took patience. It could not be hurried. The dough had rested through the night beneath linen cloths, rising slowly while moonlight crossed the rooftops. Now it would be folded, shaped, dusted with flour, and placed carefully into warm ovens until it turned golden and fragrant. The kettle gave its first tiny murmur. Not a whistle yet, just a thoughtful little sound. Oliver took down his favorite mug, the one with a small chip on the handle, and spooned in a little honey. When the water was ready, he poured it gently over the tea leaves and watched the color bloom slowly through the cup. Amber, golden, warm. He wrapped both paws around the mug and stood by the open window, far away, beyond the rooftops. The first pale hint of morning rested low upon the horizon. Not sunlight, not yet. Just the smallest whisper that dawn was on its way. The stars still sparkled overhead. The moon lingered above Owl Hill. A thin ribbon of mist drifted lazily across the meadow beyond the old stone bridge. Everything felt wonderfully peaceful. Then one clear note floated through the stillness. A robin, not a full song, just one gentle little note, almost as though it were politely asking, "Is it time yet?" Silence followed. Apparently not. Oliver chuckled softly.
Not long now.
Behind him came the faintest sound. A stretch. Maple had finally decided to wake. She arched her back slowly, stretched one front paw, then the other. Then, with a long and very dramatic yawn, she blinked her amber eyes towards Oliver.
Good morning,
Oliver said. Maple replied with a gentle little chirrup before padding across the kitchen floor. She rubbed against Oliver's leg, then sat beside the open window and lifted her nose. She smelled it too. Fresh bread, warm pastries, butter melting. Even from across the village, Mrs. Bramble's bakery seemed to wrap Willow Creek in the most comforting scent imaginable. Oliver looked towards Baker's Lane. The bakery windows glowed warmly against the darkness. like a lantern welcoming travelers home.
I think
Oliver said softly.
we should pay Mrs. Bramble a visit.
Maple's ears lifted immediately. Whether she was interested in visiting Mrs. Bramble or simply hoping there might be a warm spot beside the bakery oven, only Maple truly knew. Oliver finished his tea slowly. He rinsed the mug and set it carefully beside the sink. Then he picked up his lantern from its hook by the door. Although dawn was on its way, the lanes of Willow Creek were still dim and blue. A lantern was always a good companion before sunrise. He opened the front door. Cool morning air greeted them both. The garden outside Creek Cottage shimmered with dew. Lavender bowed gently beside the path. Honeysuckle curled around the windows. The creek whispered below the little bank, flowing patiently beneath the stars. Oliver stepped outside and Maple followed, her paws quiet upon the stone path. The cottage door closed softly behind them. For a moment, Oliver paused. He always liked this first step into the morning. That tiny moment when the whole day still seemed full of possibility, but nothing had asked anything of him yet. The village waited peacefully ahead. The old bridge rested beneath a veil of mist. The bakery glowed in the distance, and somewhere within that warm golden light, Mrs. Bramble was already busy, filling the morning with bread, cinnamon, honey, and kindness. Oliver smiled. Then he and Maple began their walk through the sleeping village. The cobbled path curved gently away from Creek Cottage. Oliver's lantern cast a soft circle of gold around his feet. Maple walked beside him, her ginger fur brushed with silver moonlight. The world was quiet enough that Oliver could hear every tiny sound: the gentle tap of his paws on the cobbles, the soft pad of Maple's footsteps, the whisper of the creek, the faint rustle of leaves. A distant creak as a wooden sign moved in the breeze. They crossed Cottage Row first. Every little house slept behind closed curtains. Warm chimneys rose into the morning dark. Flower boxes overflowed with lavender and pale roses. A watering can sat beside one doorstep. A pair of gardening gloves had been left on a bench. A basket of apples rested beneath the kitchen window, waiting patiently for someone to notice it after breakfast. Nothing moved. Nobody stirred. Willow Creek seemed to belong only to Oliver, Maple, the stars, and the scent of fresh bread. At Rose Lane, the air grew sweeter. Even in the dark, the roses seemed to share their perfume with the morning. Drops of dew clung to the petals. The lantern light caught them as Oliver passed, making each tiny droplet shine for just a moment before fading back into blue shadow. Maple paused beside a garden gate. She looked through the bars. Somewhere beyond them, something had rustled. Oliver waited. Maple lifted her tail and continued walking, clearly pretending she had never been interested in the noise at all. The old stone bridge appeared ahead. Mist hovered above the creek. The water below moved steadily over smooth stones, catching the lantern light and carrying it downstream in little golden ripples. Oliver stopped halfway across, as he nearly always did. He rested one paw on the cool stone wall and looked down. The creek reflected the moon, the stars, his lantern, and just beyond the bend, the faintest glow from Baker's Lane.
"It's going to be a beautiful day,"
he said. Maple sat beside him and looked at the water. A leaf drifted beneath the bridge, turning slowly in the current. For a moment, neither of them moved. There was no need. Some moments were made for simply standing still. At last, Oliver continued across the bridge. Baker's Lane waited on the other side. The smell of bread grew stronger with every step. Warm loaves, cinnamon buns, apple pastries, coffee, honey cakes, fresh butter. The scents mingled together in the cool morning air until they seemed almost visible, like golden ribbons drifting from the bakery windows and curling gently down the lane. The bakery itself stood at the end of the cobbled street. It was a small, cheerful building with cream-colored stone walls, a mossy roof, and dark wooden beams that had grown slightly crooked over many years. A painted sign hung above the door, Mrs. Bramble's Bakery. Beneath the words was a little picture of a loaf of bread with steam curling from the top. 2 lanterns glowed beside the doorway. In the front window, Oliver could see rows of empty baskets waiting to be filled for the morning customers. Behind the glass, warm light moved across wooden shelves. Somewhere inside, something clinked gently. A bowl, a spoon, perhaps a tray being lifted from a table. Oliver paused outside the door and breathed in deeply. The smell was so warm and comforting that even Maple closed her eyes for a moment.
"There really is nothing quite like this,"
Oliver said. Then he reached for the brass handle. The little bell above the bakery door gave the gentlest chime. Not loud, just enough to announce them to the warmth inside, and the bakery welcomed them in. As the little brass bell above the door gave its gentle chime, a wave of comforting warmth drifted over Oliver and Maple. The cool morning air disappeared behind them. The bakery wrapped around them like a favorite blanket. The first thing Oliver noticed was the smell. Fresh bread, rich butter, sweet honey, warm cinnamon, vanilla, freshly brewed coffee, and beneath it all, the comforting scent of oak flour and glowing brick ovens that had baked bread for generations. The bakery was softly lit by a hanging lantern suspended from thick wooden beams overhead. The golden light danced gently across polished oak worktops, worn smooth by countless years of baking. Copper mixing bowls hung neatly from hooks along one wall. Wooden rolling pins rested inside a large pottery jar. Glass jars filled with flour, oats, sugar, dried fruit, and spices lined sturdy shelves from floor to ceiling. Everything had its place. Everything looked loved. Nothing felt hurried. At the far end of the bakery stood the great brick oven. Its heavy iron door glowed softly with gentle orange light. The warmth spread through every corner of the room. Nearby, rows of bread rested beneath crisp white linen cloths. Some had already doubled in size during the night. Others were only just beginning their slow journey into beautiful golden loaves. Mrs. Bramble looked up from the large oak table, where she was gently kneading a mound of dough. Her round spectacles rested near the end of her nose. A little dusting of flour covered the front of her cream apron. Another had somehow found its way onto the end of one tiny ear. She smiled the moment she saw them.
Well now,
She said warmly.
I thought I recognized those footsteps.
Oliver smiled.
Good morning, Mrs. Bramble.
And a very good morning to you.
Mrs. Bramble looked down at Maple.
And good morning to you, young lady.
Maple answered with a polite chirrup before immediately noticing the warm bricks surrounding the great oven. Without the slightest hesitation, she wandered over, turned 3 slow circles, folded her paws beneath herself, and settled into the warmest little corner imaginable. Mrs. Bramble laughed quietly.
I see someone remembers exactly where the best seat is.
Oliver chuckled.
She has an excellent memory when warmth is involved.
Maple closed her eyes. Within moments, she was asleep again. Mrs. Bramble shook her head with a smile.
I've never known a cat quite so talented at finding comfortable places.
Oliver removed his lantern and hung it beside the door. The little flame flickered softly before settling. The bakery suddenly felt even more peaceful. Mrs. Bramble gently folded the dough in front of her. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. Each movement was slow, steady, practiced, almost like a peaceful dance she had repeated every morning for many, many years. Oliver watched for a moment.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone make bread quite so beautifully.
Mrs. Bramble smiled without looking up.
The dough tells you what it needs.
Oliver nodded thoughtfully.
I rather think people do too.
Mrs. Bramble laughed softly.
I've always thought that's why you and I get along.
Oliver rolled up the sleeves of his dressing gown.
May I help?
I was hoping you'd ask.
Mrs. Bramble pointed towards another bowl resting beneath a clean linen cloth.
If you'd be kind enough to shape those little cottage loaves, I'd be most grateful.
Oliver carefully lifted the cloth. Inside rested soft, pillowy dough that had risen beautifully during the night. It looked almost like a cloud. He dusted the worktop with a little flour. Tiny white specks floated gently through the warm air before settling upon the wood. Oliver smiled. Flour always reminded him of fresh snow. He lifted the first piece of dough with both paws. It felt wonderfully soft, warm from its long, peaceful rise. He shaped it carefully, turning it gently, tucking the edges underneath until it formed a smooth round loaf. Mrs. Bramble nodded approvingly.
Perfect.
I've had an excellent teacher.
Mrs. Bramble smiled. Outside, the village remained wonderfully quiet. Only now, very faintly, another robin began to sing, then another. One by one, tiny voices joined the morning. Mrs. Bramble paused her kneading for just a moment.
They're waking.
Oliver listened. The bakery had no clock. It didn't need one. The birds always knew. Nearby, the coffee pot began bubbling gently on the little iron stove. The rich aroma drifted through the room. Mrs. Bramble wandered over and poured 2 steaming mugs, one for herself, one for Oliver. She added a generous spoonful of honey to his without even asking.
You always remember.
The mugs warmed their paws as they stood quietly beside the worktop. Neither felt any need to hurry the conversation. Outside, morning was arriving. Inside, time seemed perfectly happy to wait. On the cooling rack beside the window, the very first tray of cinnamon buns rested beneath a clean tea towel, golden, soft. Their buttery swirls glistened beneath a delicate glaze. The scent drifted across the bakery. Oliver smiled.
I don't believe anyone has ever made cinnamon buns quite like yours.
Mrs. Bramble looked thoughtfully at the tray.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Oliver raised an eyebrow.
No?
She smiled.
I've simply been making the same recipe every Tuesday morning for nearly 40 years.
Oliver laughed.
Perhaps that's the secret.
Mrs. Bramble looked around her little bakery, at the warm ovens, the rising bread, the copper bowls, sleeping maple, the flour drifting lazily through beams of golden lantern light. Then she smiled the quiet smile of someone who knew they were exactly where they belonged.
I think
She said softly.
there's no finer place to welcome the morning than a warm bakery filled with friends.
Oliver looked around the room. He couldn't help but agree. Outside, dawn was finally beginning to paint the eastern sky with the palest shades of gold, and somewhere beyond the bakery windows, another little resident of Willow Creek was making his way towards Baker's Lane, a tiny leather satchel resting over one shoulder, whistling quietly to himself. Milo was beginning his morning deliveries. The bakery was wonderfully quiet. The ovens glowed softly. Fresh loaves cooled upon wooden racks. The coffee pot murmured gently on the stove. Maple remained curled beside the great brick oven, one ear twitching now and then as she dreamed. Outside, the sky had begun to soften from deep midnight blue into gentle shades of lavender. Dawn was drawing closer. Mrs. Bramble lifted another tray from the oven. Warm air filled the bakery as she opened the heavy iron door. Rows of beautifully golden cottage loaves rested inside. Their crusts crackled softly as they met the cooler morning air. Oliver smiled. He loved that sound. Fresh bread always seemed to sing its own little song. The rich smell of warm bread drifted through every corner of the bakery. For a few moments, nobody spoke. There was simply too much loveliness to interrupt. Then, the little brass bell above the bakery door gave its familiar chime. Mrs. Bramble smiled before she even looked up.
Good morning, Milo.
The door opened. Standing in the doorway was the smallest resident of Willow Creek, Milo, the field mouse. He wore his favorite blue coat buttoned neatly all the way to the top. Around his neck was a soft knitted scarf, although it was beginning to feel a little warm for scarves now that spring had arrived. Slung across one shoulder rested his tiny leather satchel. It looked almost too large for someone his size, yet somehow Milo always managed to carry it with cheerful determination. His bright little eyes sparkled as he stepped inside.
Good morning, Mrs. Bramble. Morning, Oliver. And good morning, Maple.
He looked across the bakery. Maple was fast asleep.
Or perhaps I'll simply say good morning later.
Oliver chuckled.
I think that's probably for the best.
Mrs. Bramble disappeared behind the counter for just a moment. She returned carrying a warm cinnamon bun wrapped carefully inside a little square of brown paper. Without saying a word, she opened Milo's satchel, slipped the bun inside, then closed the flap again.
There we are.
Milo smiled.
You always do that.
Mrs. Bramble looked surprised.
Do I?
You do.
And do you still pretend not to notice?
Milo grinned.
Every morning.
Oliver laughed softly.
It seems some traditions are worth keeping.
Mrs. Bramble adjusted her apron.
Now then,
She reached beneath the counter and lifted a neat bundle of envelopes tied together with green ribbon.
I believe these belong to you.
Milo accepted them carefully. He untied the ribbon and looked through each envelope one by one. Mrs. Hazel, Fox Hollow, Barnaby, Owl Hill, Mrs. Mallard, Lily Pond, Old Woolly, the Great Meadow. Oliver noticed the final envelope. It simply read, "The Little House with the Blue Door."
No name?
Oliver asked. Milo smiled.
Everyone knows whose house that is.
Mrs. Bramble nodded.
Miss Ivy.
The one with all the climbing roses.
The very same.
Milo tucked the letters neatly back into his satchel. Then, from another pocket, he carefully removed a tiny notebook. Every delivery, every birthday, every invitation, every thank you card, every recipe, every little message passed through Willow Creek eventually found its way into Milo's notebook. Oliver had often wondered how someone so small managed to keep such careful records. Mrs. Bramble poured Milo a tiny cup of warm milk with just a drop of honey.
It'll help before your walk.
Thank you.
He accepted it with both paws. For a few peaceful moments, the three friends simply stood together. Outside, another robin began to sing. Then another, then another. The dawn chorus was growing. Milo listened with a smile.
I think spring sounds happiest before breakfast.
Mrs. Bramble nodded.
So do I.
Oliver looked through the bakery window. The eastern sky now glowed softly with pale gold. Light was slowly touching the tops of the cottages. Before long, Willow Creek would wake. Children would open their curtains. Gardens would fill with bird song. The first customers would arrive for fresh bread. But not yet. For now, the village still belonged to those who welcomed the morning. Mrs. Bramble looked thoughtfully at Milo.
Before you go,
She reached beneath the counter once more. This time she produced a tiny cloth bag. Inside rested 6 miniature bread rolls, still warm.
I made these especially.
Milo looked puzzled.
For me?
Mrs. Bramble smiled.
For sharing.
Milo's face lit up.
Oh, I know exactly who'll enjoy these.
Mrs. Bramble winked.
I rather thought you might.
Milo carefully placed the little bag into his satchel beside the cinnamon bun.
There,
He fastened the buckle.
everything's ready.
Oliver picked up his lantern once more.
I think Maple and I might walk with you for a little while.
At that very moment, Maple opened one eye. She stretched, yawned enormously, then wandered slowly across the warm bakery floor. Mrs. Bramble laughed.
Perfect timing.
Maple rubbed affectionately against Mrs. Bramble's apron before padding towards the door. Oliver smiled.
I do believe she's decided it's time to begin the day.
Mrs. Bramble walked with them to the bakery door. She opened it slowly. Cool morning air drifted inside. Outside, the very first rays of sunshine touched the rooftops of Willow Creek. The day had finally begun. Together, Oliver, Maple, and Milo stepped out onto Baker's Lane. Ahead of them, the quiet village waited patiently to wake, and somewhere inside Milo's little satchel, a warm cinnamon bun filled the air with the comforting smell of butter, honey, and home. The first rays of sunshine stretched gently across Baker's Lane. The stars quietly faded one by one. The moon drifted lower behind Owl Hill. A new day had arrived in Willow Creek. Oliver breathed deeply. The morning air felt wonderfully fresh after the warmth of the bakery. Beside him, Maple padded lazily along the cobbled lane, her ginger fur glowing softly in the early sunlight. Milo adjusted the strap of his little leather satchel. Inside, the letters rested neatly together. Beside them, wrapped carefully in brown paper, was the warm cinnamon bun Mrs. Bramble had quietly slipped inside. And beneath that, a tiny cloth bag containing 6 miniature bread rolls.
For sharing.
Mrs. Bramble had said. Milo smiled every time he thought about it. The 3 friends walked together through the peaceful village. Every few moments another bird joined the morning chorus. Blackbirds, robins, wrens, a cheerful chaffinch somewhere high in an apple tree. The whole village seemed to be waking one gentle song at a time. Their first stop came only a few minutes later. Lily Pond. Mist still hovered above the water like a thin silver blanket. Water lilies floated peacefully across the still surface. Dragonflies had not yet begun their morning dance. Everything was wonderfully quiet. Near the reeds floated Mrs. Mallard. Her ducklings were still tucked closely beside her, tiny heads hidden beneath soft wings. Only Mrs. Mallard was awake. She smiled as the friends approached.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mrs. Mallard.
Oliver replied. Milo carefully opened his satchel.
I have something for you, Mrs. Mallard.
He handed her a neatly folded envelope tied with pale blue ribbon. Mrs. Mallard smiled.
My sister has written.
She carefully tucked the letter beneath one wing.
Thank you, Milo.
Then Milo reached back into his satchel.
And Mrs. Bramble asked me to share these.
He offered one of the tiny bread rolls. Mrs. Mallard accepted it gratefully.
How thoughtful.
She broke the little roll carefully into tiny pieces. One by one, the ducklings slowly lifted sleepy little heads, still half asleep, still wonderfully fluffy. They nibbled breakfast together as the morning sunlight sparkled across the pond. Maple watched quietly from the grass. A butterfly drifted past her nose. She considered chasing it, then decided breakfast looked much too peaceful to interrupt. Oliver smiled.
Perhaps another day.
Maple seemed perfectly happy with that arrangement. Their next stop lay beyond the meadow. The long grass shimmered beneath thousands of tiny dewdrops. Wildflowers nodded gently in the breeze. The old oak tree stood proudly upon the hillside exactly as it always had, and beneath it, old Wooly, fast asleep. Oliver couldn't help smiling.
Good morning, old Wooly.
Nothing. Only the gentlest snore. Milo laughed quietly.
I don't think he's missed a morning nap in years.
Oliver shook his head.
I don't think he's missed an afternoon one either.
Mrs. Bramble's little bread roll rested beside old Wooly on a smooth stone. No one needed to wake him. He'd find it eventually. The three friends continued along the winding path. The village was beginning to stir now. Curtains opened, front doors creaked, smoke curled gently from chimneys. Someone swept their doorstep. Somewhere nearby, a kettle began to whistle. The comforting sounds of another ordinary morning slowly filled Willow Creek. At the edge of Whispering Woods, they paused once more. High above them, Barnaby sat upon his favorite branch. The wise old owl had watched over the village all through the night. Now, with daylight arriving, his work was almost done. Milo waved.
I've something for you.
Barnaby glided silently from the branch. Not a feather seemed to make a sound. He landed gracefully upon an old tree stump beside them. Milo handed him a small envelope sealed with dark green wax. Barnaby nodded.
My thanks.
Then Milo produced another tiny bread roll. Barnaby accepted it with a quiet smile.
Mrs. Bramble remembers everyone.
She certainly does.
Oliver agreed. Barnaby looked towards the brightening sky.
The village is awake.
Those 4 words were all he said. They were enough. With one powerful sweep of his wings, Barnaby lifted gracefully back into the great oak tree. Within moments, his eyes had gently closed. The guardian of Willow Creek was ready for his own peaceful sleep. Oliver looked towards the village below. Golden morning sunlight now touched every rooftop. Children's laughter floated faintly through the air. The bakery chimney released another curl of warm smoke. Fresh bread would already be disappearing from Mrs. Bramble's shelves. Life had begun once more. Milo delivered the last few letters along Cottage Row. Each doorstep received a cheerful wave. Each neighbor smiled. Nobody seemed surprised to see him. Milo always appeared exactly when the village expected him. At last, his satchel was empty. Well, almost. He reached inside. The cinnamon bun remained. Mrs. Bramble had known perfectly well he wouldn't eat it straight away. She also knew exactly where he was heading. Oliver's garden. The 3 friends returned to Creek Cottage. The morning sunshine now filled the little garden with warm golden light. Lavender swayed gently beside the path. Bees buzzed lazily among the flowers. Oliver unlocked the cottage door. Inside, everything felt exactly as they had left it. Comfortable, peaceful, home. Oliver placed the fresh loaf of bread upon the kitchen table. Its crust gave one final gentle crackle as it cooled. He sliced 3 generous pieces, one for himself, one for Maple, and one for Milo. He spread fresh butter across the warm bread. It melted almost immediately. Then came a little drizzle of golden honey, just enough. Never too much. Milo finally unwrapped his cinnamon bun. The sweet scent filled the little kitchen. Maple immediately appeared beside the table. Oliver laughed.
So that's where you've been.
Maple looked at the bun, then at Oliver, then back at the bun. Oliver smiled knowingly.
I don't suppose Mrs. Bramble made one especially for cats.
Maple purred anyway. Milo tore off the tiniest corner and placed it gently into a little saucer. Maple sniffed it, licked it once, then decided the warm patch of sunshine beside the window was still far more interesting. Within moments, she was asleep again. Oliver poured one final cup of honey tea. The three friends sat together in peaceful silence. No one felt the need to fill the room with conversation. Outside, Willow Creek was alive. Children skipped along Cottage Row. Mrs. Bramble welcomed her first customers. Mrs. Mallard led her ducklings across Lily Pond. Old Woolly was still asleep beneath the oak tree. Barnaby rested high above Owl Hill. And somewhere in the distance, the church bell rang softly. Oliver carried his tea to the kitchen window. He looked across the village he loved so dearly. Every little cottage, every winding lane, every smiling neighbor, every quiet corner.
What a lovely morning,
he whispered. The sunlight warmed his face. The creek sparkled below. Behind him, Maple dreamed peacefully in the sunshine. Milo gathered his satchel, ready for another day of quiet kindness. And Willow Creek carried on, exactly as it always had. Slowly, gently, together. Because in Willow Creek, the day always began with fresh bread, kind hearts, and the comforting feeling that no matter where life took you, there would always be a warm welcome waiting for you.
Good night, and sweet dreams.